It's the final word World Cup Daily Day 38, I'm pretty sure. The early game at Pune, which was between Australia and Bangladesh. I'm Adam Collins, Cam Ponsonby's with me. We're here for Westfield, London, Westfield, Stratford City. More extra, less ordinary. Should get that right now. Been only doing it for about 6 months. Cam, tell us about the game that was in 30 seconds.
What could have been for Bangladesh, but what was a very professional victory for Australia. Bangladesh got themselves up to 170 for 2 around the 27 over mark and only managed to get 306-7 from there on in. It was a fantastic batting wicket, as proven by Mitch Marsh, who guided the chase from start to finish, 177 not out, aided by a half-century from David Warner and unbeaten half-century from Steve Smith. They cruised home by 8 wickets with about 7,000 balls to spare. What a win for the Aussies.
Yeah, it was about 7,000 balls, wasn't it? Marsh, 177 not from 132, 9 sixes, and Smith 63 not out from 64 4-4s and a 6. So Labuschagne didn't need to bat. We might come back to the Smith-Labuschagne stoush in our conversation. Bangladesh only getting 306 because they only managed to get 65 together in the final 10 overs. And part of that's Australia bowling well. Sean Abbott especially in the side for his first run in this World Cup and did a good job picking up 2 for 60. And I think more of it though, and I'm kind of stealing Ricky Ponting's point from television here, is that all of these players got starts. You look at the top 7, they're everybody between the score 21 and 74, so more than a start in the latter's case. But yeah, none of them were on 100 or even on 60 or 70 or whatever it is to be able to do maximum damage in the back 10, which meant Australia had, if you like, some momentum going into it. And even after losing head early, they were able to recover that and do as they pleased.
Yeah, and I think going back to all I can ever think about when watching Australia and Mitch Marsh, as we'll speak about him more later, is he's just the coach's dream. Like that innings kind of turned on its head a little bit with 2 run-outs affected by Marnus, and this kind of idea of like, well, if you can't contribute with bat or ball, do your work in the field. And he genuinely did. They inflicted one direct hit run out, but the one that wasn't a direct hit was almost all the more impressive, and it meant that Bangladesh only, inverted commas, got themselves up to 300. And when you could saw the kind of how I can never quite get my head around how powerful a player Mitchell Marsh is. He drops his bat on the ball, but it's like a granite bat basically, and it kind of flies away. I always think of those like I looked it up. It's called like a steam hammer, where it's like you lift it up and he just drops and like hammers something down really powerfully. And I always think of that when I'm watching Mitchell Marsh bat, because I can't quite get my head around where he generates his power from, because it just comes to him with such ease. And if you look at that Australian side at the moment, they have top 3 in Head, Warner and Mitchell Marsh. It's such a powerhouse. And maybe I'm looking for silver linings to where India might fall down, but that could be one of them.
The steam hammer. That'd be quite a good nickname. There was an Australian cricketer many years ago who was known as the Ram Raider, but for different reasons. But the steam hammer, it sounds like a good one to me. Yeah, so Marsh, after missing a game 2 games ago, he spoke beautifully about his pop, who passed away, and he missed that game. I can't remember who he missed. It was England, which in hindsight it seems like a walk in the park for them. It didn't look so when they released the fixtures 3 months ago. But yeah, back in the side, looked like he was going to make runs against Afghanistan before getting out, and has been such an important cog in the Aussie wheel. Like, starting the tournament opening before Head got here, or got to India rather, the half century against Sri Lanka in an absolute must-win game. You know, they've got on a roll, 7 on the trot. They're the informed team with India going into the semi-final stage of the tournament. But if they drop that game against Sri Lanka, then none of this is possible. And Marsh was a big part of that story. The big 100, big opening stand against Pakistan, which in a way felt like it was must-win too, because where Pakistan was sitting on the table at that particular juncture. And now, having made this massive 100, his second World Cup ton, drawing level with his old man Jeff, who made 2 back in 1987, where Australia won the tournament in India, if you like these types of things.
It is. Mitchell Marsh's career is very interesting, because he's obviously a player of such ability, and there were quotes a couple of years ago when he was making his way back into the squad, so when he was netting it, I think it was Glenn Maxwell said something like, he's hitting the ball better than anyone I've ever seen. And like, what a ludicrous statement that is from another, like a fellow professional who see people in the nets every day of their lives. And he's like, this is the best I've ever seen anyone hit a cricket ball. And he's obviously had so much he has the pressure of the kind of family name going alongside him. He's following in his brother like Sean's footsteps as well. And having had so many of these opportunities and having numbers which aren't particularly impressive in the grand scheme of things, you kind of go, okay, he's 31, 32. kind of has his time gone? Is he going to be this player where people go, oh, what a player he could have been? And now all of a sudden he's finding his kind of feet in multiple formats. He's the captain of the T20 side. He is now this kind of leading figure in the ODI side, and he's forced his way back into the Test side. All of a sudden you can see a world where over the next 2 or 3 years he is one of these kind of first names on an Aussie team sheet, and that didn't necessarily seem like a future that was that likely all of 6 to 12 months ago.
Yeah, you're right. He's the incumbent number 6 for Australia in Test cricket, and there'll be a conversation about that before the Aussie summer, but performances like this reinforce the point that he's very much a senior player. He was made vice-captain of the Aussie Test team back in 2018 after the sandpaper saga. And the only reason I raised that is that they've always thought of him as a leader. He's clearly the next captain of this one-day side. I doubt Pat Cummins will ever play a one-day international again after the semi-final and or final here. So that'll be the next thing for him. Doing it as he did today with Smith. So let's come to that. So Labuschagne plays his role in the field. I said this after the New Zealand game a couple of weeks ago. I pondered aloud on Twitter, as one does, whether if you were picking between the two of them, whether you might land on Labuschagne purely down to the fact that he is capable of creating a wicket in the field. And I'm not saying Smith's a bad fielder, Christ. I mean, Smith's one of Australia's great slippers. His ability to take diving catches is up there with the all-time greats, if not, he is an all-time great, right, in that position. But in limited overs cricket, what Labuschagne can do sweeping and how accurate his throwing arm is, both inside the ring and out in the deep, I do think it's a factor. I mean, you don't pick a team based on your fielding ability, but if it were, let's say this, if it were a tie-break situation, and I know Smith batted well today, put on 175 with Marsh, who was the junior partner, did his job, went on to run a ball, finished the game with a boundary and so on. But yeah, their numbers across the tournament are basically identical.
Yeah. I don't know. Is that allowed to be an answer? I don't know what Australia are going to do. I think the fact that Smith did bat at 4 today and Labuschagne was down at 5 does speak to like the kind of ingrained seniority rankings. I'd be shocked if it's a hell of a call to leave out Steve Smith because he's Steve Smith, and I know that's not how you're meant to make the selection decisions. But we're all kidding ourselves if like a reputation and like a player's caliber doesn't come into it necessarily. Yeah. But it is. We were speaking about it before we started recording. Like Labuschagne has gone from being not in the squad, being down to captain the A side, to playing every single group game. I'm convinced every single game of this World Cup there's been some type of selection thing where it's like, oh, Labuschagne won't play that game, then someone falls over, someone falls off a golf cart, someone gets a vertigo. There's all these kind of anomalous events happening at the same time, which means that Labuschagne is one of only 4 players, along with Zampa, Cummins and Warner, to have played all of the 9 group games. And then to get the boot one for the semi-final, I mean, it would be a tough gig, but someone's going to have to miss out. Yeah,
there is another way of doing this, and I think Dan Chaney, our colleague from News Corp, put this up the other day on Twitter. It'll be now 17 one-day internationals he's played on the trot since the point when he was left out of the World Cup. 18, not even the 15, the 18. Got in the 15 because they thought they'll take the spare bat instead of Ashton Agar, and then played every game in the group stage, averaged 36, couple of half centuries, and been so good in the field. And there is another way, and that is Marcus Stoinis. If they wish to go into a semi-final with a bowling lineup that has 4 frontliners plus Maxwell / Mitch Marsh. Now, Mitch Marsh went for runs today. He conceded 50-odd across his 4 overs. 48 off 4. So, I mean, and I'm not saying that Marsh can't do a job. Calcutta, likely to spin. Maxwell's bowled brilliantly through this tournament. He'll come back into the side. Of course, they're resting him after the heroics a few nights ago. Today, no need putting any extra stress on his back and hamstrings and so on. So, provided Maxwell's fit and good to go, which he will be on Thursday for the semi at Eden Gardens, they could feasibly say, Stoinis all-round value to the side at number 6 or number 7, but of greater value is stabilising our top 4, having an extra anchor in there and trusting Maxwell and possibly Mitchell Marsh to get through 10, and that might be enough. I mean, it's a bit risky because if one bowler goes down, then they're going to have to get a lot more out of Mitchell Marsh, but that might be another way they can do this.
I think if we're going to then tie it up to the opposition of who they're playing in South Africa are this kind of massive risk-reward team. I think you probably do want the strongest bowling attack you can have because of how powerful that top 6 is. And because of how powerful South Africa's top 6 is, you probably also want the more volatile batter in your own lineup because there's a chance you're either going to be chasing 150 or 350, basically. So if you're chasing 150, it doesn't matter if you've got Marcus Stoinis and you don't have the stabilising factors. But if you're chasing 350 and above, it does matter if you have the two kind of like rotating players in the middle. I think there's often, and people, there was a conversation with South Africa about this after Feflequeo got them over the line yesterday of whether they could bring in that extra all-rounder for the semi-finals to shore up that batting lineup. I think often there can be, when you're making decisions like this after group stage, after you followed a process for a one-off match, it can be like you dress it up as a brave decision, but actually it's a kind of act of cowardice. Basically, it's an act of shitting yourself, going, "Oh my God, this is really important now. We should change." I think if Australia were to move from the setup they've had, where they believe the best balance to get themselves to a World Cup semi-final, and over the last years has been to have Marcus Stoinis, to have that balance of all-rounders. If they changed from that now, yes, they'd say, we thought this was the best way to make an 11 for this match and to win this game. But actually, I think that would be an act of kind of diverting from what you've believed in, and I don't think that's necessarily the brave call.
Yeah, and the other thing is you can have Labuschagne on the field for the full 50 overs because they always find a way, don't they? Even when fielding first, I remember Jadeja in 2019 had more touches than anyone in the comp, and he only played 2 games, I think, or something like that. So there is a way of engineering it, but it isn't without some risk either. So that's the decision for the selectors to make. Australia finished 3rd, by the way. That doesn't really mean anything because of the multiple super overs, but it might if it does rain both days in Calcutta. It is, and the forecast isn't great, and South Africa in that scenario would go through because their net run rate was better by, in the end, about 0.4. And considering the head start South Africa got on net run rate and how in the whole Australia was, they've done a pretty good job to drag it back.
Yeah, I don't know what 0.4 means. I know this has kind of become a thing where maybe I should just learn. Right? It's like I've got a mate of mine's been gone out with a Spanish girl for 7 years and just doesn't know how to speak any Spanish. And it was funny once, and now it's like, mate, like, come on. And I'm going to sit here and chat about cricket. I should probably get my head around net run rate.
Jeff and I have never bothered to learn it, but it sounds like a small number, right? 0.4 doesn't feel...
It's not one.
It's not. Yeah,
it's not a whole number.
If it's not a whole number, then it can't mean that much.
But yeah, I think it's a very unlikely scenario. You basically have to get 70 overs of cricket in across 2 days. There is rain forecast for those 2 days across Calcutta, and it's a thing.
It'll be 40 overs, won't it? Because 20 overs to constitute a game.
But I don't know. That's one thing I don't know. Is if you have to get up to 50 overs, if you've got all that time, whether you lose overs from both innings or whether it comes back. Yeah. But the idea is you pick up on the second day where you left off on the first day. It's not like a reset case.
Like what happened to England in '99 when India knocked them out across a 2-day. What became like the elimination final, exactly that way. And the semi-final in 19.
2 days, play Saturday and Saturday.
Australian cricket,
easy.
2
That's
days
the future.
And 90 overs. Yeah. I don't know why they don't play 2-day cricket in England.
No, he's trying to get people. There's no way you're getting people to commit. There's so many stag doos that happen over the summer.
People have stag doos in Australia.
No, they don't. I know that's for a fact.
You know what they do? No one gets married if you play cricket. You're not allowed to get married in the Aussie summer.
Not ever.
It's kind of like hard and fast rule.
Okay, but you are allowed to get married eventually
in footy season. Carefully.
Okay, cool.
There are like 4 dates in the calendar where it's allowable to get married in Australia. Like Good Friday's a good day for it. No footy on the cricket season's end.
Teammate of mine next year has invited me to a stag do and his wedding both in the season.
Saturdays as well.
I don't like him that much.
We got married on a Tuesday, day before the Lord's Test. There's other ways of doing this.
Sensible thinker.
Working around it. So, what else? Yeah, just on Smith, by the way, like having missed the previous game with vertigo, which is an odd thing to miss for, the way that played out, Bharat Sundaresan documented all of this on Twitter. Low key important that he came back into the side and made a contribution, as it was for Marsh, who looked okay the other night before getting out, but another dominant performance. It's like. If you're doing it in trend lines, we went into this a bit with New Zealand and Sri Lanka 2 days ago when we were speaking, Cam. Like Australia are going into the semi-finals as the other form team. Yeah. New Zealand aren't, I wouldn't say.
They've won one of their last 5.
One of their last 5. South Africa have tapered off a bit. They got pumped on Sunday by India and were, I think, unconvincing against Afghanistan yesterday in a couple of different departments, although they did get the job done with a couple of overs to spare. So, they might have finished 3rd, but if you were saying who is the side more likely to win at Eden Gardens, I actually think it's Australia.
No, I think you can make a very strong case now to where you could write it all down. You could work out what Australia's strengths are, and you can go, well, of course they're performing very well. They've got an incredibly strong top 3. They've got the famous fast bowling trio still, and they've got an elite wrist spinner.
Yeah.
Adam Zampa's having like a genuinely great World Cup. He's taken 23 wickets at 18.9,
which means that's the same number of wickets that Murali took in 2007, the most ever in a World Cup.
And we often talk of those two players in the same breath.
People are always saying that. Adam Zampa, Matai Murali.
And
I
found it really interesting. He again had a very strong showing today. He was very economical. But I found it really interesting when he had a great showing against England and the way he spoke about it. Because I think he took 2 or 3 for 20 odd and didn't go for a boundary. And he was talking about how he considers a successful performance, because if you are a spinner in the modern game, there are going to be days where you go for 113 in an ODI like he did earlier this year. And so he was talking about his control of length and how that's what really matters to him, and how he left it as satisfied with the bowling performance as he'd ever been, basically. So he's releasing the ball exactly as he wants to be at the right time. How much this anecdote is worth, I don't really know, but I've always remembered it and found it interesting. I've got two good friends of mine played against Zampa in club cricket however long ago, and they both said the exact same thing independently. They both went, they faced his leggy and they went, yeah, cool, like very good leggy, but whatever. And they faced his wrong and they both went, what the fuck is that? Yeah. Like, I don't recognise the shapes, the sounds, whatever that is coming down at me. And I've always thought that was quite a good indicator of the career that Zampa's gone on to have, and that he's become this white ball specialist, elite player, where you are having to attack him, and people find it very difficult to attack him because he has those kind of variations.
And what's the cliche? The stumps are always in play.
Stumps are always in play with
Adam.
Stumps
are always in play with Adam Zampa. Just want to quickly recap on Bangladesh. We did this yesterday with Afghanistan and the day before with Sri Lanka, it being Bangladesh's final game. The major disappointment, along with England, I think, in the 2023 World Cup. They had a pretty good World Cup Super League. The expectation was that in conditions that are fairly similar to home for them, that they were going to be a chance to make a semi-final. In the end, they win 2 games, the first of which was against Afghanistan, which now seems like a great outlier. I can't believe they beat Afghanistan based on what we now know, and they got the better of Sri Lanka after the controversy on Monday. By the way, the MCC put out a great statement today on the timed out. I strongly recommend it. It goes to the minute 54 thing. That's now the accepted wisdom of when Matthews, when the wicket fell until Matthews' strap went, there was a minute 54. The ICC, the MCC, is saying, well, hang on, was he ready? Was he going to be ready to face the ball within 6 seconds? Clearly not.
Yeah.
I think that's worth reading, even if it is now a bit after the Lord Mayor show, so to speak. So the Bangladesh campaign. They will still probably finish 8th, so they'll make the Champions Trophy. Shakib was the first one to put this on the radar. I think we know that Shanto's their next captain. Got out today. That was the run out, the first of the 2 run outs from Labuschagne. But you can see there's something there. I'm big on Tanzit Hassan. I think he's going to be a real player. I know he only played like 3 or 4 one-days before the World Cup, but there's been enough. He made 36 today, caught and bowled by Abbott, who was good too.
Yep.
Abbott won't make the semi-final. They'll bring Stark back, but if one of them trot on a cricket ball, great person to have there. Lytton Das, we've seen his all-round class in the last couple of years. Likewise, Shanto, who's been a revelation across all 3 formats now. Mahmudullah and Mushfiqur played their final World Cup games today. A nod to both of them. They have been amazing servants to Bangladesh cricket. But Shakib missing today, went back injured after the game on Monday. It feels like Huradoy as well, who made 74 and top scored for them, then played with panache and played with style, a few leg flicks and so on. There is something going on there. Mehdi Hassan is only 24 years of age. I think he's captained this Bangladesh side occasionally in the last 12 months. They're going to have to start again. And I guess the beauty of World Cup cycles is it's a good time to draw a line under a side's poor performance, and they can do that. I think there's something there, but the shame is that they didn't click often enough in this tournament, especially with the bat.
Yeah, and it's a very volatile period of Bangladesh. That so much of their backroom staff are either kind of their contracts are up and they're either going. So Alan Donald's going. That the head coach came in around 9 months ago and said at the time, he was like, "This is not enough time to prepare for a World Cup. My job starts at the end of the World Cup." Which, I mean, yeah, it feels like you're giving yourself an insurance policy. Maybe I think that's what I'd say.
Good PR.
Yeah, exactly. Like under promise, over deliver. And then if you do well in the World Cup, you go, "Well, I am very, very good at my job," basically. And so I don't really know necessarily what is next. They've had Tamim Iqbal go. Shakib said he wanted to he's eyed up the 2025 Champions Trophy. I think I'd love to say that there's some element of structure and there's a plan. If there is, I'm sure there is in the kind of powers that be. I don't necessarily know what it will be other than let's just keep playing cricket. I don't think you just sack off Mahmudullah and Mushfiqur, because I'm of the opinion you just keep playing, basically, if you are good enough. In the same way, if you're young enough, if you're old enough, you're good enough. Good enough, you're old enough. I think that also holds true for when you're too old as well as too young, if that makes sense.
Whenever I hear that, I think of Mike Bassett, that wonderful movie about the parody of the 1990 World Cup, where he writes out the side on the back of a cigarette packet and accidentally picks a 42-year-old Benson and another one called Hedges. But if you're good enough.
My point being, basically, Bangladesh came to this World Cup and it was going to be exciting because they had not only were they had the stereotypical strengths of like, they're playing in India, and it should suit them. They also had this great pace attack, which hasn't quite fired. They had this great batting lineup that hasn't quite fired.
Yeah.
It's all just been kind of very much of a damp squib. But they've qualified for the Champions Trophy, so mission success.
Am I right in saying that Pakistan are co-hosting that with Bangladesh? I've got a feeling that Champions
yes,
Trophy.
because Pakistan have automatically qualified. But is that because they're hosting or because they?
No.
Won it?
Yeah, you're right. Bangladesh can't be a co-host because otherwise they wouldn't have been worried about qualification in quite the same way. So at least it'll be a tournament in Asia. They might have a couple of those senior guys hold on, but yeah, I do think this will be a time for transition. I'm also long on Tashkent Ahmed. Like, he's still quick, he's still good, right? He's
yeah.
You know, it's the support around, but I suppose they'll have time to think about that on their flight back to Dhaka. Not a long one. Time for the final word: Hall of Fame. Final word: World Cup Hall of Fame is brought to you by Westfield London and Westfield Stratford City. Cam, I've taken to not intentionally not reading the ad copy before I read it out live. Yesterday we had Sheehan writing about big sacks and so on in relation to Glenn Maxwell. It ended up being a joke about Santa and sitting on Santa's lap, which you can do at Westfield London. Sheehan Solo, that's his Twitter handle, or X, whatever it is now. If you can't get in through the conventional booking system, tweet Sheehan and he'll sort it out. If you're a final word listener. So that's a nice thing. Because it is very hard getting a spot on Father Christmas's lap for a photo. We learnt this the hard way in Melbourne last year with Winnie. We 2 years ago rather, could not find any shopping centre that wasn't at full capacity. Wow. So this is the sort of thing if you've got young kids to start thinking about now. Right, where are we? Kidzania adult nights. Okay. This could go anywhere. Kidzania adult nights. Let your inner child run wild at Kidzania. Oh, I see. Okay. The biggest little city in town. Kidzania is an immersive role-playing experience for kids aged 4 to 14 where they can sample all the delights of capitalist society while trying their hand at more than 25 careers, including a journalist, a newsreader, a firefighter, a musician, an AC repair person, or a florist. But why should kids have all the fun? On the 15th of December, so a bit of time, over a month, Kidzania's adult nights are back. And you can come along and join the fun without all those pesky kids running around and making everything sticky. There's food, booze, a DJ and a dance floor. So when you're sick of pretending to be a doctor or an accountant, you can come down to Kidzania adult night, and every time I say that I think of something else, and pretend to be something else, indeed, keys in the bowl, earn your itchy and scratchy money and spend it on a ruler in the gift shop. Book tickets now to avoid missing out. Kidzania is only at Westfield London. That's a bloody good idea. An adult night at Kidzania. Consider me curious and interested.
Is she inviting us to a sex party? Is that what's happening right now?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. He knows what he's doing. He's just had a kid. Okay. Kidzania. Google it. Kidzania at Westfield London. More extra, less ordinary. Both them and Westfield Stratford City. Cam, your final word moment of the day?
My final word moment of the day was David Warner chipped one to mid-on. Mm-hmm. It was caught by...
As you scroll up the page, it was Shanto, the captain.
And in the act of catching the ball, he holds on to it for about a second. He's definitely held it. He then goes back and then, in the act of throwing the ball up in the air, hits himself in like the arse and drops it. No one kind of bats an eyelid at it. It's just kind of like out, basically. And I do think it's out because he did really have the ball for a very long time. Mm-hmm. It wasn't quite like Gibbs, and it also wasn't like the Stokes one over the summer where he was off balance, and that's why his hand kind of brushed his leg on the way through, basically.
Okay. He controlled the ball.
He controlled the ball, but there was a moment where Ricky Ponting wasn't happy with it on comms or was intrigued by it. And then the moment where it kind of all wrapped up nicely is rather than it having looked at by the umpires, fourth umpire showed the Australian dugout the video of it, and they all just pissed themselves laughing at like basically the expense of their old mate David Warner, who had just walked off and didn't even know what was going on.
Nice one. Mine's kind of umpiring adjacent as well, where late in the piece, Marsh was down the non-strikers in about 140 odd. Smith straight drive, and Mustafiza nearly got a boot to it, as we later learnt when they went through the third umpire process, and Marsh would have been run out. So Marsh just starts walking off with a smile on his face, assuming that Mustafiza's touched the ball in that classic Mitch Marsh way. Oh, bit of bad luck, but oh well, had a nice time. It's been a great day out. I've enjoyed my work. Then Mustafiza's like, oh, I'm not sure if I've. He goes, oh, I'm not sure. Oh, we better review it then. Yeah. It's all very convivial, and at one point Marsh had his arm around the Bangladesh fielders, and he's just an absolute delight. And that little vignette or that little example summed it up for me, that he just was willing to accept. Oh, it's probably out. Yeah, no, all good. I suppose you have that luxury when you're on 144 to be blasé about your wicket. And that moment which you brought my attention to Cam, where Mushfiqur. Now, back in 2017, when I went to Bangladesh for a couple of test matches that Australia played, Mushfiqur, as captain, was excellent on making the case repeatedly and stridently that Australia had treated Bangladesh poorly over the years with touring and so on, and not having the reciprocity given to them. They got completely done over in the winter, I think it was, of 2018, maybe 2019, can't remember now, where they were meant to play 2 test matches in the top end, and for the umpteenth time, CA just cancelled it. They didn't even put a press release out, right? It was so disrespectful to a fellow full member. This is in the pre-World Test Championship era when you can get away with that sort of shit. And today, Mushfiqur said to Mitch Marsh, and picked up by the stump mics, why don't you come over here for a test match? And you can imagine Marsh would be like, yeah, it's a great idea.
Oh, why not?
I'd love to go to Bangladesh and play test cricket. You can see how he would have been. The other person that was involved in that exchange in 2017 was Steve Smith, the Australian captain. He was like, I really look forward to welcoming Bangladesh to Australia. Now, I know they do have, in the Future Tours program, a series coming up in one format or another at some stage. But Bangladesh said, very clearly at the 2019 World Cup, they have felt disrespected by Australia, and I know they've been beaten tonight, but I hope the relations between those countries get better, because Bangladesh is a great cricketing nation. They deserve more respect, and they deserve to have Australia not only visit there, but in return as well. They should spend time in Australia playing international cricket, and I'm glad that came up, albeit on the stump mics today, Cam.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, I don't know when Australia's last tour of Bangladesh was, and I guess that's kind of
they've been there. It's more, well, they went to those tests in 17 and back for white ball stuff year before last, I think. It's more that Bangladesh haven't played a bilateral series in Australia, a test series, since 2003. One and done. Right. One and done. 20 years.
Them and Johnny Wilkinson.
Yeah. Them and Johnny Wilkinson. And look, they haven't toured England since 2010 either. England are just as bad. We spoke to Richard Gould about this on The Final Word earlier this year, and to be fair to Gould, he knows this is a problem. Yeah. They've invited Zimbabwe for a test, and hopefully they follow suit with Bangladesh, because you can't treat full members like shit. You can't do it anymore. It's not allowable in the modern era for the bigger nations to go, we don't need them, because it's in everyone's interest that international cricket continues to flourish.
Absolutely. And well, when England last went over there in 2016,
that's right.
The series of Zafar Ansari and Gareth Batty, as it's known within the annals of history.
Great win as well. They won at Dhaka.
Bangladesh. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. But when these nations go to these other countries who are traditionally disrespected, often the results are that much closer, because we all think they're shit because, when they come here, we roll them over. But that's because everyone wins at home, basically. And
that's one of the best things I've ever seen in my time covering cricket, was when Bangladesh beat Australia on the final day at Dhaka by like 30-odd runs. The Prime Minister was there. She was in tears. It was anyone that went on that tour, the players and the journos included, loved it over there. So anyway, didn't expect to go on that tangent late, but here we are. That's the end of our show. The second part of today, so Jeff's got someone with him. He'll be talking about England and Pakistan. England are doing much better today than the last time you and I recorded on a Saturday. What do they make? Give us a progress score.
337 for England. Ben Stokes got 84, 89, something like that, 84. And Pakistan are 63 for 3 in reply.
So they're not going to win the game in 40 deliveries.
They're not.
The semi.
It's David Willey's got 2 and Gus Atkinson's got Babar Azam. Good player.
David Willey's final game for England. I wonder when he'll come out of retirement at some point.
Let's give him another contract. Yeah, it's that. Leave it to Jeff. And
then we've got you and I doing India and the Dutch tomorrow, which is the final group game, then into the semi-finals. And you know how it works. It is the Final Word Daily, Day 38, Part 1. Adam Collins, Cam Ponsonby for Westfield London, Westfield Stratford City. More extra, less ordinary.